Hello, welcome to Hook and Eye. Today we will be demonstrating basic hand stitches for mending and button repair. First, I'm going to use a scrap here that I have a hole in. We're going to teach you how to close it up using a ladder stitch. As you can see, we have a small slice and we're going to close it up. You're going to want to use a thread that matches your project, but for right now I'm going to be using something darker and thicker to show you what I'm doing. You start by threading your needle and tying a knot in one end, and then we're going to come up behind our hole so that our knot stays hidden, so either inside your project or behind. And then our first series of stitches is going to jump across the hole, and when we come up, we're going to come up to either the left or the right side of that first stitch. And then we're going to jump to the opposite side and come up right next to it. As you make the stitches, you see that they look like a little ladder or little stairs moving in one direction. We're going to continue this down the entire length of the hole, and we're going to gradually tighten our thread as we go so that we are cinching the hole closed. As you can see, you can't see the stitches once you pull that tension and you cinch the hole tighter. And then you're just going to complete the process down the length of the hole, just jumping over the hole in parallel lines until you reach the end. And then you're going to pull your knot to the back side and make sure you cinch it up nice and tight. And closing it up, it brings those two edges together and gives you a clean finish. You can't see your stitches. And then once we are done, we're going to flip it to the back side and we're going to tie off a knot so that we secure it. You want to make sure you don't pull your thread too tight because you don't want it to pucker. You want it to lay nice and flat, and you can hit it with a little iron or steam from your iron after you're completed. To tie off, I make a loop in the fabric and then I pull my needle through 2 times to do a double knot and pull it tight. I clip a little tail so that the knot stays secure, and we are completed with our first ladder stitch. Alright, next we have the running stitch. This is the most basic hand stitch that there is. We're going to start the same way as before with our knot behind, coming up from behind our fabric. And with this, you're going to do a series of in and out stitches in a straight line, and usually they're between 1/4 of an inch or smaller. You can use this to create shapes. You can use this to close up seams. You can use this to do decorative embroidery stitches. It's very, very simple. You kind of determine your stitch length based on what your project is needed. And you can also use this to create ruffles or gathering where you pull the fabric tight over the threads and it bunches up. So basically you just go in and out in the desired stitch length. You want to keep your stitches consistent so that they each have the same amount of tension and hold. And when you're done, you tie off on the back side. I'm going to show you here how you can take this and use it to create a decorative stitch, making little X's that can be used in embroidery or mending. And basically you're going to do the same stitch that we taught you previously, which is the ladder stitch, and you're going to jump over each running stitch that we've created, popping up next to the previous one. Instead of pulling them tight to close up a hole, you're going to just leave your tension looser so that it stays nice and flat. And we continue this through the end, and you'll see that we have a little series of X's that we have created. And you just flatten out if it gets a little tight, and when you're ready to be done, we tie off on the back again with a double knot. And here I loop my needle 2 times. and I'm going to tie or cut off just a tiny tail. Up next, we will be showing you the back stitch, which is very similar to a running stitch. It's used it for the same type of things. However, with this one, we are going to do something a little bit different. When we start, again, we want to come up from behind our fabric, and instead of going to the left or in a straight line like our running stitch, we're going to start moving backwards, and then when we come up through the front, we're going to jump in front of the thread that we originally put up. So if you take a look, you're going to end up with a stitch that has a space next to it. And then when we go to make our next stitch, we are going to close that space and try to jump into the same exact hole, or as close as we can, as the previous one. And we're going to pull it through the back side. And then when we pop out through the front, we're going to leave a little gap again next to that stitch, and we're going to come out about 1/4 of an inch over. So once I pull my thread up, you see I have now 2 stitches with a little space. I'm going to fill the space, pull my needle through the back, and when I jump up to the front, I'm going to leave again another little 1/4 inch gap. And as you see, this fills in into a straight line, whereas your running stitch, you could see parts of the fabric and the stitch. This is going to be a solid line, which is a more secure stitch, and also can be used in embroidery to create words, outlines, lines, shapes. It can be used for a lot of different things. It's very versatile. When you're done, we're going to tie off our knot on the back side again, just looping under the threads and pulling our needle through twice. And here's a close-up of our straight line. Up next, we are going to show you the blind hem stitch. Here I am going to act like this is my pair of my pants, and this is the flap that needs to be hemmed up. I am going to start by taking my needle, and we're going to, instead of coming up all the way through the back, we're going to come up underneath the flap so that the knot is hidden in between those 2 pieces. And now for my next stitch, I'm going to go straight up into the facing of the pant, and I'm going to grab just a couple strands of fibers, as few as you can. Sometimes they call it a pick stitch. We're going to pull it all the way through, and then we're going to dip under the flap about 1/4 of an inch away and come up through the top. We're going to repeat this stitch the length of our hem, grabbing as few fibers as we can when we are attaching it to that facing side of the pant. And here we go. I'll show you again, just wiggling your needle in and grabbing just a couple strands and pulling it through. And we're going to just continue this down the line. And what this does is when I flip it over to show you, you won't be able to see your stitches on the front because we're just taking a few fibers. And as we're nearing the end here, I'm going to tie off a double knot. I'm going to loop my thread under my thread and then double loop it to create a knot. Clip a little tail, and I'll show you how it looks on the inside and on the outside. See, you can't see any of those stitches. Had I been using a matching thread, you really wouldn't see them. Here I'm doubling up my thread as I thread my needle to show you the proper way to stitch on a button. Once I have my needle loaded up with the thread and knotted on one end, I'm going to start on the top side of the fabric, creating a little stitch and then reinforcing it with one more stitch. My button is going to end up covering that knot. So here I thread it through the button. You can either go diagonal or parallel across depending on how you want your buttons to be stitched on or how they are already stitched on your garment if this is a repair. Once I loop through the first set of holes, I'm going to create another little stitch going through the fabric, pulling tight, making sure I don't have any loose thread. And then I'm going to come up through my next set of holes and pull all the way through the fabric to the back side. And I'm going to repeat this twice. I'm going to go through each set of holes 2 times so that way I have a nice secure button. And here I'm coming up and going down through my second set. Now when I come back up, instead of coming up through one of those holes, I'm going to come out the side of the button. So the needle comes in between the fabric and the button. And now I'm going to wrap my excess thread here. I'm going to wrap it around 5 times, pulling tightly while I do, and then flattening out my fabric so that it doesn't stay puckered or tense, and it creates a little stack. Now I'm going to stick my needle through that stack of threads we created, not through the fabric, but through the stack of threads, and I'm going to pull it through. But before I pull it all the way through, I am going to double loop my needle through to tie off a knot, which I didn't use a whole lot of thread here, so it's a smaller knot to show you, but this gives you a really secure button that will last a very long time. Thanks so much, guys, for watching our video. We had a blast teaching you all of these new stitches. If you have questions, you can visit us at hookandeyeferndale.com or feel free to visit us in store in downtown Ferndale. Hope you have a great day.